Hi, and welcome to another online learning opportunity provided by Alpha Phi Omega. The fraternity takes pride in offering real-time resources to serve active members, alumni, prospective members, and the communities that support them. This session will focus on virtual chapter meetings and how your chapter can make the most out of meeting online. Now, let's get to it. The 4 essentials you see here, prepare, delegate, execute, and follow up, are key to a successful meeting. We will break down each of these essentials here to help you understand how they play into the success of a meeting, but first, let's begin with a brief overview. Beginning with prepare, preparing before a chapter meeting helps your chapter avoid winging it through the establishment of a game plan. Moving on to delegate, this may be a term your chapter is already familiar with. Delegation is assigning responsibilities to these chapter leaders. So identifying the team to help the chapter meeting take place and giving them their tasks to play into the success of the meeting. Execute then is the actual conducting of the meeting, which revolves around creating an agenda and, of course, sticking to it. Last but not least, the follow-up. Providing members a follow-up gives them actionable steps to take after the meeting to remain engaged and refer back to information they may have missed or need a quick refresh on. With meeting preparation, the big question we're asking here is, what do you need for a productive and fun meeting? We've highlighted a couple items to consider, but first and foremost, it's important to narrow down the method of communication that will be used chapter-wide and how and when meetings will be used to your chapter's advantage. One thing to keep in mind here is having a consistent meeting time for your chapter meetings. That could be a day of the week, or it could be a day of the week and a specific time. Doing so will allow meetings to not only be consistent, but that will have a positive reflection on attendance to accommodate as many members as possible. So members on their agenda and on their schedule know, yep, I have a meeting Tuesdays at 7. I'm going to block that time out. We will get further into some platforms and software that are available to your chapter to conduct these meetings, but begin thinking about the location, time, and date of the meeting. Begin with those logistics. After you've navigated through that, you can begin working through meeting must-haves like starting chapter business, member check-ins, and generally just infusing fun into the meeting however you can. Lastly, establish a set of expectations for presenters and attendees that limit distractions and keep everyone on the same page. We will provide you with a baseline of expectations to help you build from, but at minimum, start thinking about what these expectations might look like for your chapter. Technology, of course, grants us the convenience of being able to meet whenever, wherever. And now more than ever, there's not a better time to utilize virtual chapter meetings as best as you can. Here we have highlighted a few avenues of online communication that have been used by APO chapters or other members before. Listed here we have Zoom, which is a very popular platform right now, Free Conference, Whereby, formerly known as Appear-In, or Google Hangouts. Now, you see there are only 4 softwares or platforms provided here, so if you're in search of opportunities beyond these 4, visit the APO website and navigate to the chapter officers area where you can see a more comprehensive list of other platforms that have been helpful to APO members when meeting online. Now, when establishing virtual chapter meetings, you want to make sure that the avenue of online communication is consistent the same way that you would for that meeting time. So if you begin working with Zoom or Google Hangouts, for example, make sure that you're sticking with that method throughout all of the virtual chapter meetings moving forward. If the chapter finds that a certain platform doesn't work for them, be sure to find a next alternative and communicate that to the rest of the chapter as efficiently as possible. That way all members can shift to that new method. Moving on to delegate, we want to understand who is involved in the execution of the meeting. And generally speaking, your chapter operates as a team. And during these virtual chapter meeting times, there are other teams that are involved in making the meeting happen. So begin with assigning responsibilities to chapter leaders, including positions like a meeting minute recorder or a timekeeper, and then, of course, your general facilitators who lead the meeting. To avoid confusion and then maintain engagement, try to limit the number of facilitators to no more than 3. That will give your chapter a fresh voice throughout different parts of the meeting, but won't be confusing as to who's talking, and you won't have members talking over one another. Involved in this team to help make the meeting go as efficiently and effectively as possible, collaborate with those chapter advisors. They're a wonderful resource, and during this time, you can connect with them to be sure that the chapter has considered all possible options to make communication as seamless as possible. Those advisors can take their APO knowledge or professional experience and apply it here to the benefit of the chapter. To get further into this team dynamic, let's define the team that helps this meeting take place. I had mentioned the first 3 here, meeting minute recorder, timekeeper, and facilitators, but what do they actually do? The meeting minute recorder is, what its name sounds like. They're accurately recording the decisions, commitments, and major talking points made at the meeting. Having meeting minutes is a wonderful resource for chapters between meeting times, especially if after the meeting you have a member that maybe needs a refresher on the information or needs to refer back to a conversation that happened. And not only that, but meeting minutes are great for members that may not have been able to attend the chapter meeting for that given week due to prior obligations. They then can take a look at these meeting minutes and still be up to date in the loop and on the same page as the rest of the chapter. Next here is a timekeeper, and very similar to a meeting minute recorder, the name says it all. The timekeeper is monitoring the time spent on meeting discussions and conversations to stay on track. This will allow digressions, although we know they happen. We can stay on track with time and still be able to meet the needs of the chapter through the assigned meeting agenda and the allotted meeting time. During any meeting, whether it's a chapter meeting, a committee meeting, or otherwise, you want to be sure to be respectful of the attendees and other commitments that they may have. So staying on time and adhering to the time allotted for the meeting is very important and very respectful for you to do. Moving on to facilitators. Facilitators are the folks that are effectively delivering that important information, they're guiding decision-making, and generally speaking, just moderating the discussions that take place during a meeting. Like I mentioned before, no more than 2 to 3 facilitators. That way, there's no confusion about who's speaking, and for facilitators themselves, they aren't speaking over one another. On a similar note to facilitators, the chapter can utilize guest speakers, which utilizing guest speakers is an awesome way to switch up the agenda with a new face in front of the chapter to share their experiences, insights, and other resources. This could be someone from the community sharing an opportunity you all can get involved with virtually, or this could be someone from campus giving the chapter an update on some resources that are available as you all shift to a new norm. But again, guest speakers are great folks to bring in and again, switch up the meeting agenda to have a new leader in front sharing their experience. Last but not least, here we have chapter advisors. And as always, we know that chapter advisors are a great resource, and in virtual meetings or any meeting in general, they can assist chapter officers with fielding questions and providing resources during chapter meeting time. They can pull from their own personal APO knowledge or professional and personal experience to field questions that maybe a chapter officer isn't super confident in answering, or providing resources or, shifting attention to the direction the chapter should go. They're really great guidance, mentors, general supporters of the chapter. So use them to your advantage while you all are virtual. This is the team, and again, as with any information here, customize what your chapter needs. If you find that a timekeeper can be substituted for just generally, the timers on our phones or whatever else, shift your chapter's needs to accommodate what this team needs to look like. Now, moving on to the bones of the meeting. What is needed to have a successful meeting? What is needed to execute a successful chapter meeting? We're going to focus here on developing an agenda. And an agenda can be something as simple as a list of topics that your chapter wants to stick to talking about, or it can be as detailed as a prepared set of slides that were congregated beforehand. In any event, remember to keep your meeting priorities in mind for each part of your meeting. Be sure that when you're talking about service, for example, you're staying on track with those service-focused details, conversations, discussions. That way, again, your chapter can stay on track and be sure that the important information is being passed along. This next point, collaborating with officers of the chapter, is something that happens in the execute stage, but also happens in the preparation stage. So while you're preparing, make sure that your chapter is communicating to all officers, hey, we want your voice to be heard. What information as part of the program that you oversee may you need to be passed along during this time? Since we're only having 2 to 3 facilitators here, not every chapter officer may be able to get in front of the chapter every single week. So this collaboration prior can help the important updates be communicated on their behalf. Last here we have, just keep it interesting. Who said meetings have to be all business? Add a fun element to each meeting to keep content fresh. That can be something silly like a hat day, or it can be an interesting way for your members to engage virtually while you are all having this meeting. Now, I had mentioned before establishing expectations, and here before you, we have 4 expectations that act as a foundation for expectations your chapter can build off based on the needs of your meeting. Beginning with video settings, all attendees should have their video turned on, and sound should be muted until an attendee or facilitator has something to add to the conversation, it's their time to speak, or generally someone has a question. For smaller group meetings, you may not have to begin by muting yourself, but for groups, say 10 or 15 people and more, your chapter should consider beginning the meeting with everybody muted except for that one person that is starting the meeting off. As far as location goes, attendees should position themselves in a safe and relatively quiet environment with a reliable internet connection. Many platforms now give you the opportunity to test your connection prior to actually getting into the meeting. Just make sure that you're in a location where you are connected and that connection is consistent. If that means you have to maybe disconnect your cell phone and other devices from the internet temporarily, go ahead and do that. That way you can remain engaged and online throughout the duration of the meeting. Since I mentioned other technology, cell phones and other devices should be silenced and put away for the duration of the meeting to limit distractions. Text messages coming through, emails, or other pop-ups on mobile devices can be very distracting. And right now, we are all virtually connected now more than ever. So be present with your members and set your cell phone aside or other devices that don't need to be used to get you into this meeting. That way, you can have your full attention and be present for the entire conversation. Just like in-person meetings, for attendance, all members are expected to attend chapter meetings unless otherwise indicated. Refer to the chapter's bylaws for meeting attendance expectations, as they don't necessarily need to fluctuate as virtual accommodations are made. If your chapter sees a need for changing the attendance expectations, then absolutely do so. But refer to those bylaws for expectations and, of course, procedures for excused absences. Now, last here we have follow-up. How can members stay engaged after the meeting takes place? A lot of information is passed along during chapter meetings. That's not an unknown fact. So it's important to find a way or multiple ways for members to digest the information and remain engaged with what's happening with the chapter. Meeting follow-up can take form in so many fun and creative ways, so find a way that works for your chapter and stick with it. A couple ways your chapter can stay connected after meetings while apart is A, like I had mentioned, distributing meeting minutes for members to reference between those meeting times, but also providing members with actionable steps that they can take to either apply the information or just to stay connected between those group meeting sessions. For example, members can participate in online events shared during the meeting. That could be a leadership opportunity like attending Launch Online as part of the APO Leads program, or it could be participating in a virtual service event the chapter shared during the meeting time. Another option is planning a virtual coffee date with a member you don't often chat with. Get out of your normal circle of friends and connect with some new members that maybe you don't chat with on a regular basis. And lastly, find a new way that you can serve your community online and share it with the chapter. Help the other leaders of the chapter that oversee, say, a program, and bring opportunities that you may think benefit the chapter and share it with them. Everybody's in search of something new, and if you find something that meets the needs or the target of the chapter, definitely bring that information forward so others can take advantage of that opportunity you found. Now, all of this information is great, and you can reference back to this video at any point in time. For more resources, you should check out the roadmap for virtual chapter operations. This resource can be found on the APO website in the chapter officers area. And in there, you can learn more about the who, what, when, where, and how of virtual chapter meetings and much, much more. We hope this information serves your chapter well as the foundation for navigating online meeting. Thank you for tuning in.